On today's starting nine, Carl and Jake welcome legendary umpire Joe West to talk all things retirement, behind the scenes, and his relationship with Jake Arrieta on the mound. Before and after that, we've got some top five, bottom fives. We got a new segment called Jake Explains. We're getting into some big stories. And of course, the famous starting nine segment we all know and love. Let's get into the show. Let's have a great day. Action! And welcome back to Starting Nine. I'm your host, Carl, joined by Jake Arrieta in Texas, and obviously Colin Cooper on the ones and twos. Jake, what's going on, man? It looks like we got a little technical difficulties to start the show. How's the second week at Barstool Sports? Is the studio up and running?
It's been good. It's pieced together with duct tape, man, but we're making it work. Once I get in this new house, hopefully we'll have better internet. I don't know if Brittany paid the bill this month, but we're making it work.
Yeah, you got to get the what's the dial up, the commercial connection or something like that. The pixels.
Yeah, it's like T1, T2 or something like that. I need that government line.
Did you anticipate this much troubleshooting early into your retirement?
I did with the podcast. Yeah, I absolutely did. I've got a plastic folding table with a nice tablecloth we got off Amazon. You know, Colin was nice enough to send me some of this nice equipment. We got some lights off Amazon, put some stuff on the wall behind me. So it's coming together, but it's not where we need it to be just yet. But this is our fourth episode. So by the third or fourth week, we'll be dialed in.
Yeah, progress is coming along. I feel strong about it. It's funny because when we were talking early and you were like, yeah, so like, what's the deal? Like, do I need to go buy the equipment? Or are you guys going to send it to me? I'm like, yeah, no. I talked to Hank. We're going to send a fucking team down. We got guys. We got a contractor on retainer.
You lied to me.
Stuff. Well, it was more along the lines of like, this is what I would expect us to do.
Well, it's like a rookie hazing initiation. So like a little bit of panic is probably part of the skit. So there's been some of that involved, but
yeah, I
can handle it. We're gonna deal with it and find a way to get through it.
Bro, we pulled off an interview. We got Joe West coming on, joining the show in a little bit here. Obviously, legendary. I think I can say Hall of Fame umpire. He hasn't been elected yet. He probably will be. 5,460 games. He jumps on. You guys have like a pretty funny relationship. There's a great story about you coming off a mound and telling him to get ready. So we're going to get to that in a little bit. Stick around for the Joe West interview. Before we do get to the Joe West interview, though, obviously a couple segments, couple things I want to run through. We talked last show about the Boston Red Sox and whether or not they're a team that could turn it around. I watched them give up 5 home runs in the same inning last night. Shout out to the fan who caught 2 of them, by the way. I'm out on the Red Sox. I'm just like, they should just sell. Like, I don't know. I don't see any world where the Red Sox are going to be competitive this year.
Yeah. And, Houston coming off of the streak that they just recently had, they're hot. And, it was at home with Evaldi on the mound. So very rare sight to see, not something you would expect, especially against a guy like that. But yeah, it's not looking good for Boston. I mean, they're 4-6 in the last 10, but when you're 13 games behind in that division, it's going to be pretty rough to try and, climb that hill. So we'll see what they do. I mean, I don't think it's out of the question.
Yeah. We talk a lot about you can't win anything in April and May, but you can fucking lose it. And especially in the AL East, like you just don't have the room to dick around. And maybe that is kind of like, I feel like Boston's one of those markets where like, if you get slapped or punched in the face as hard as they did by the Astros, like they're willing to just be like, fuck it, we're out, move on to the next fucking season. And so like, maybe that is kind of part of their makeup and their DNA, but certainly something to keep your eyes peeled on. I know this Barstool, particularly this podcast, strong Boston Red Sox presence. I hate to break it to you guys. I think the team they look like absolute fucking trash right now. And another team that looks terrible to me, and a lot of people, the Nationals, they could spin it around in the long run, but they're so bad. Colin comes in the show, pre-show meeting today, and he's like, you guys hear about Juan Soto might be getting traded? And Jake, you and I pretty much kind of laughed in his face a little bit.
I did not say that. I said, do you think it's a possibility that Juan Soto gets traded this year?
I mean, it's definitely a possibility. Definitely a possibility. But to give up a player like that, then you have to look on the flip side, what you would get for him. Is that attractive enough to make that move? And when you're a team like Washington, when you're trying to figure out what you have on the mound with these young players, you understand that you're going to lose a lot of ball games. Strasburg I don't know when he had the thoracic outlet surgery, but he's out for a while.
Mhm.
There's really not many bright spots in that lineup, and the rotation is just kind of, they're rolling guys out there to see what they're capable of. So it's not looking good for them, especially in that division. That division is probably going to get, ran away with by the Mets. So, and I'm pretty sure that's exactly what Colin wants to hear.
Did the Mets
Colin.
win? Did the Mets win 100 games this year? That's what I want to know.
I think they'll get close. Yeah, I definitely think they'll get close if they stay healthy. And that's a cliche, but it's so vitally important for a team down the stretch to stay healthy. I mean, if you get banged up with some minor injuries here and there, guys have hamstrings or maybe an oblique, which you can bounce back from. But if you have guys that miss extended periods of time with major injuries, and especially key role players in that lineup or in that rotation or bullpen, then it becomes a little bit harder to foresee them winning 100 games. But where they're at right now, I mean, they're at 24 wins. They've got a shot to get there. I mean, that's a difficult, feat to achieve 100 wins. And even on some of those great Cubs teams I was a part of, we never got to 100 wins. So it's in the cards. It's in the cards, but they're going to need some good fortune, and obviously health is one of those big factors that they're going to have to make sure they maintain.
Yeah, going back to the Nationals too, the fucking pitching staff there is just so, you got a couple guys that are young and electric. You brought up Josiah Gray and Adon, and like if it lines up with Strasburg, it's kind of, it would be stupid to move Juan Soto. He becomes a free agent. He's a free agent, I think 2025. So you have this year 2 more full seasons with Juan Soto. If you're gonna trade him, it's because you don't have the confidence that Josiah Gray and Adon are going to be able to pitch at the top of the rotation with a guy like Strasburg finishing out his contract. And so if you have to move a Juan Soto, holy fuck, though, you get to ask for the bag. Like if you're the GM for the Nats, like this is one of the all-time great trade pieces because he's a legendary left-handed hitter at such a young age already. What he's accomplished in October, his plate presence, just the type of way he can just completely expand a lineup and make the guys in front of him better and the guys behind him dangerous and stuff. He's the near as much of a difficult out, I think, as it is in Major League Baseball.
And days. He's a guy that could you imagine sliding him into a lineup like the Dodgers or the Padres or even the Mets? Like, could you it's just, it takes you to just another level that it's hard to imagine, really, especially a team with a run differential, like some of these teams, in the 50s, 60s, 70s plus. I mean, how many more runs does Juan Soto add to that lineup? So it's scary. Again, a team that has a stocked farm system might take a look at it. You throw in a couple major league ready players, you throw in an established major league player, and maybe you have something there. But again, I don't see it happening. I could be wrong. But like, you mentioned with Josiah and Adon paired together with Strasburg and a couple other guys, it could take a year or two for those guys to get to the point where they're actually ready to win serious ball games for that organization. And everybody wants it to happen now, but the likelihood of that happening, especially multiple guys at the same time, from my experience, it rarely works out that way.
Yeah. And the worst thing you could do with Juan Soto is run a bunch of teams out there that win fucking 70, 78 games or something, and then next thing you know, he leaves and like all you get out of that is a draft pick or, that's just the worst case scenario obviously would be like not offering him a qualifying offer, but that's a completely different story. They offered him like $500 million this offseason. He was like, nope. Like, whoa, there's a dude who's willing to bet on himself. So, Juan Soto, keep our eye on him. I feel like we also don't want a guy like Juan Soto playing on a below average team or bad team when we could be celebrating him. We've already seen what he's done in October. So,
well, there's always going to be, you got to think about certain superstars around the game who have been on bad teams for a majority of their career. There's been several of them, and not every superstar can play on playoff teams, unfortunately. Right. You look at Joey Votto, and frustrating situation for him kind of being in that position. I give him credit for not making more of trying to get out of Cincinnati, right? I would love to see him play more meaningful games in October. But then again, like, how do you get all the best players on the best teams? It's just really hard to do so.
Let's stay good. Let's stay bad though. I think we introduced this last week, top 5. We meant to do bottom 5. We got a little deep. I do want to do this on Thursday and just kind of round this up heading into the weekend. A lot of people see some names again the Saturday, maybe been out having a couple of beers. You're going to hit the board for a little bit. You like a little afternoon action. This is just a little heat check. Let you guys know who's hot, who's really not, with some momentum stuff. Let's start with our bottom 5. I'll give you my bottom 5 counting down. I've got the Red Sox as the 5th worst team right now, followed by the Rangers. The Nationals is the 3rd worst team. The Orioles, I'm sorry, I like my Orioles a lot. They're a great color combination. 2nd worst team, and Reds is the worst team in Major League Baseball, even though the Reds have had a little bit momentum here. And I'm interested to put the Red Sox in my bottom 5 because it's more about them just completely bombing on expectations, despite having, a formidable lineup and at least pitchers that are comfortable pitching for the Red Sox. We talked a little bit about the Nationals. They're just a train wreck across the board. They've got the worst pitching staff to me in baseball if you look at some of their numbers relative to the rest of the National League. The Orioles you can't get too mad about the Orioles, but it's almost like the Orioles want to be this bad. They've wanted to be this bad for a while. So I have no problem sliding the Orioles in a second. Like, this is what you get for the Baltimore Orioles. There's some other teams that compete for the bottom 5, but to me, it's like the Reds are obviously dead last, and that goes down to the fabric, the culture. The fans want to take a dump in the fans want to take a dump in like the pickup truck and outfield and stuff. So they're losing their minds. There's my bottom 5. Did I miss any? Do you like anything? Where do we match anything up? Who do you have as your 5 worst teams in Major League Baseball right now?
Well, I wouldn't put Boston in there. I just wouldn't, because and they were where for you? Your 3rd.
They're my 5th worst team. They just snuck in there.
Yeah,
and it's part of it because they needed to show up against yesterday's game against the Astros.
No, that was tough
punch I've ever seen.
Yeah, I think that they have a lot more talent. I think they have some veteran players, and they have some decent arms. They're playing like shit. They just flat out are playing like shit. My bottom 5, and you can really flip flop some of these. I'll go from my 5th to the worst. I got Detroit, Kansas City, Baltimore, the Nationals, and Cincinnati. And I think that just some of these teams are, Detroit signed Javi. I feel like that they had to do something. They got him for 6 years. Hopefully they can figure some things out over these next couple seasons. Obviously they have some prospects, but every team has prospects. At what point do you look at your player development? Because some of these organizations have struggled with developing players for a long time. Kansas City, they've got some players that they have some decent players. They've got Whit Merrifield there. They've got Bobby Witt Jr., who's obviously been struggling as a young player. They got Salvi behind the plate. They're not throwing the ball very well. They don't have a great bullpen. Baltimore sitting
fired their hitting coach too.
They just fired the hitting coach. Again, I always scratch my head when there's a move like that. I just think it's not necessarily sending the message that they're trying to send. The hitting coach isn't taking the at-bats for his guys. Who knows? I don't know the relationship there. Maybe it just wasn't going well. So be it. Baltimore's in a division with some really, really good teams. They're going to struggle. They started out the year pitching fairly well, especially at home. But again, that lineup there's really nobody in that lineup that scares you. Outside of Jesus, well, what the hell is the left fielder?
Mancini, the Italian from Notre Dame.
Mancini, obviously a great player, but 1 or 2 guys can't do it by themselves.
Right.
The Nationals can't pitch, can't score runs outside of Soto. There's just nothing that scares you there. So, and when you have a lineup like that with 1 or 2 decent hitters in it, you pitch around them, you go to the next guy, and you avoid all issues. And then Cincinnati, they finally got to 10 wins. They've wasted a career like Joey Votto's for a long time. Again, they're an organization that's banking on young players coming up and succeeding right away. And a lot of the times that doesn't happen. You look at the teams that are very skilled, talented, good starting rotations, great bullpens, good defense. most of these teams are guys that, there are some homegrown players, but it's the teams that aren't afraid to spend money. So again, not everybody can do it the way that Tampa's done it. That model has tried to be followed by a lot of these teams. Again, the player development in Tampa is incredible. Maybe there needs an upgrade in these instructors and the player development plan in these organizations, because frankly it hasn't worked for a lot of these teams.
And if you ran this conversation back, honestly, 10, 15, 20 years, I mean, these are teams that get talked about a lot. You know what I mean? There's years that pop up, and we could be talking about the Pirates just as easily. I'm glad you bring up the Royals and the Tigers. They've been struggling for a little bit. The Royals had their hot little run, but you kept lightning in a bottle. I'm sure if you asked their fans, they would have expected to have a little bit more competitiveness coming out of that. But I think it just kind of goes to show you, man, like this is the organizations in the player development, like you're talking about, the teams that do it right, that know what they're looking for. There's a reason they find themselves, at the top again and again. And as on the subject of the top, I'd like to take a second before we get to our top five. Thank our good friends at Celsius Energy. Celsius helps you stay active and energized all day, made with premium ingredients, 0 sugar, 7 essential vitamins, not like a traditional energy drink at all, guys. And they got delicious flavors, including mango, passion fruit, raspberry, acai.
God, you got to get that right.
Acai. Well, it's so exotic. That's how you know it's exotic. You can't really pronounce it that well. Peach mango, strawberry lemonade, and way more. The list goes on and on. Personally, my favorite, though, is the raspberry acai, because I do have the tendency to reach for the exotic. They also have different product lines for all situations, including Celsius Heat, which has caffeine and helps boost energy. Celsius BCA plus energy, which helps with recovery after a workout, which I do all the time. Celsius on the go, smaller powdered packets and all their different flavors. You can just add to your water bottle whenever you need a boost. Go to Celsius.com, exactly how you think it's spelled, Celsius.com, to find a store near you, or order online at Amazon, Walmart, or Target. Celsius. Live fit, guys. Celsius, good stuff. And I hope our audience that fits into the bottom five right now, like, it's nothing personal. Like, I know there's Red Sox fans that are gonna be like, well, what the fuck? You think this and this? It's like, well, don't fucking come at me. Your team should be way better. Like, you guys went in and see, you did not think that you'd be 13 games under fucking. Like, don't come at me with this controversy and all this bullshit. Like, you guys are getting your doors blown off. The fan base is not proud at all of the product. So if I'm just going to sit here and call a spade, if I'm a Red Sox fan, I'm much more pissed off than I am if I'm a Tigers fan or a Royals fan or a Pirates fan or someone who's used to this, etc.
So if they're taking it personal, they know that it's probably accurate. And then again, like we're not giving you these lists because we don't like these guys or the teams. Just we're going off the eye test.
I don't want the Red Sox in my bottom five. I want the Red Sox.
I don't either.
It's nothing personal. Top five, though, on the subject though of leaving people out and creating controversy. Jake, we asked you last week to put together a top five. It might have been the first time you've ever had to publish a top five, and you caught the ire of some fans from New York City. One in particular sitting on this podcast right now. And the Mets last week just missed the cut. They came in at number 6. We'll see where they fit if they make their way into Jake's top 5 this week. A lot of people said it was because Daniel Murphy hit a home run off you.
I forgot about that, by the way. Come on.
And
Colin
didn't care about that
either.
Colin doesn't believe that you forgot about it.
I do not.
Look, obviously I knew it happened, but it's not. I mean, that's the last thing on my mind. Congratulations to Daniel Murphy. Who won the World Series that year?
Not you guys.
Okay.
Okay, let's get the top 10. I'll count down from my top 10. I have the we'll just be quick here. I have the Giants at number 5. I love the San Francisco Giants. I always will love the San Francisco Giants. I have the San Francisco Giants at 5. I have the Tampa Bay Rays at 4. I have the New York Mets at 3. I have the Los Angeles Dodgers at 2, and I have the Yankees at 1. I feel like this is very similar to what it was last week.
Wow.
And it's not juicy, it's not chalk, it's not sexy, but the fact is the Yankees were 1 last week. They're 1 this week. They came into the White Sox. That was a huge series for the White Sox. And I'll say, as a Chicago boy walking around town, the buzz around the White Sox playing the Yankees this weekend was a big fucking deal. And all the White Sox want to do is split, because to them, if they split, then they were
That's
like,
a
look,
win.
we're on even. Yep, we're on even standing with them. We're above 500. We've gotten through our early season bullshit. A lot of guys have had slow starts to the year. They came in, they had the fourth game of the series. It was Michael Kopech versus Nestor Cortez. It was a Sunday. Everybody was all dialed in. The Yankees came in. They didn't hit Michael Kopech well at all. They still controlled the game. They still won. Nestor Cortez fucking dealt. I thought for sure the White Sox would be in my top 5 throughout this entire season, and they just haven't played well enough. And so I really just want to focus on the fact that the Yankees, we talked a little bit this week. When you come in, you play the Yankees, you're going to give a better effort. And like the White Sox did everything they could. They got their fucking dick smashed in. The Yankees look great. And again, the Dodgers look great too, even though they got smoked by the Phillies. I know they gave up a ton of runs against the Phillies last weekend, but it's just the fucking Dodgers until that lineup's not that lineup. And I'm sorry, Colin, you guys lost your first series of the year. Otherwise, I'd probably have you guys firmly in the second spot.
It's all right with me.
That's a good list. I mean, this is hard because you're going to leave teams out that are great teams. A team for me, I'll start from the bottom. Number 5, I got San Diego in there.
Yep.
Number 4, we got the Mets in there. Okay. Mets are a great team. Got the Astros at 3, Dodgers at 2, Yankees at 1. And I threw San Diego in there because the way they pitch, they were at a point where they were trying to figure out what to do with the rotation because they had so many starters. With Gore pitching the way he's pitching, you have Clevenger back. I mean, you can be virtually unhittable at times. Same thing with Musgrove. You got Manaea, and I believe Snell is currently injured. But man, this guy, when he's out there, he's dominant. He's got no hit stuff every time he takes them out, and a couple of the guys in that rotation do. The Mets, just watching these guys play, they don't give up. They battle from behind. You've got a guy like McNeil who just continues to hit, and he's a guy that every manager wants in his lineup. The guy is extremely difficult to get out, and if you slip up and you make a mistake, he's going to make you pay. He will go to the opposite field, which is really impressive. I mean, a couple of nights ago, it looked like he was choked up almost to the barrel, and just took his knock to left field and kept it moving. I think they ended up losing that game, but that's not the point. He's passing the baton and getting the next guy to the plate, giving his team a chance. The Astros at 3, 12-game win streak. They lose one, they come back. They win the next game. They come out against Boston and do what they did. The 5 homers in Fenway Park in 1 inning against Eovaldi, very impressive. They pitch well. They got a balanced lineup. Yordan Alvarez, they're tough. Okay. And in that division, and I've said this from the start of the year, has to go through Houston, no matter how well Anaheim plays, no matter what, the Mariners try and do, you got to get past the Astros. The Dodgers, what do they not do well? They throw the ball well, they catch it. They've got an elite lineup. There's no breaks in that lineup. Even with Muncy struggling, still a very, very good lineup with a great bullpen. And, when you play in Dodger Stadium, it's kind of like Yankee Stadium. You get more effort out of teams, but it almost doesn't even matter. Dodgers Stadium is a difficult place to play as a team, as a road team. And it seems like, kind of like with the Mets now, it doesn't matter if they're behind late in the game, they find a way to come back. And even if they don't win, they make it very difficult on the visiting team. The Yankees, I mean, what can you say bad about them? A guy like Cortez is pitching like an ace. And that's what I've talked about from the get-go is teams need production like this from unassuming guys to take that next step. And not that the Yankees wouldn't have been good without Cortez pitching the way that he is, but it just puts them over the top. And when you have Stanton and Judge, and Rizzo's probably going to hit for a career high homers this year, Donaldson's performing, they play good defense. Their bullpen is incredible. They're my number 1 team right now.
Yeah, they're the Yankees. They're fucking hotter than hot, man. I mean, the Yankees get going, and the Yankees are just like absolute. I mean, they just shit pump people. Like and to your point about Rizzo in the way he can offset that clubhouse and just like come from a different place. And people who've played for New York have said that it is a completely different environment than all the other environments, and that you do have oversight from the front office about how your fucking uniforms look. You know, you come off the field and it's like, hey, it's the left field coach wants to talk to you about the way you filled the base hit with nobody on and 2 outs. It's like, oh, why are you trying to coach me up so much? And what's with all this? It's just a very intense environment. And so for guys that come up and succeed and live in that environment throughout their career, it's good to take a guy like Anthony Rizzo and plug him in there. He's like, yo, dude, I've done fucking 14 years of professional baseball, 15 years of professional baseball in San Diego and Chicago, in very laid back environments where it's like, yeah, we're buddies, we're chopping it up, we're having a good time. You know, it's about, you know, I don't know. That's kind of the sense that I get. And I think it's good for the Yankees to have that in the long run over the course of a season, not just a guy that you trade for and you ask to come in and do that in the second half, somebody who's there with you in April and May, and you kind of build that up. So it looks like that's a great fucking contract for the Yankees so far. You know, I mean, just like,
Oh yeah.
2
Yeah.
years, 32
Absolutely.
million. Like, come on, that's amazing. So,
Yep.
I did have another, I have another thing I want to talk about our good friends. This podcast is also sponsored by BetterHelp. Life is full of twists and turns, stress, changes, grief, moments of growth, moments of watching the Mets in the 9th inning, moments where we feel like we're taking steps back. And it's important to show up for yourself through all the struggles that life can bring. BetterHelp Online Therapy is here for the twists and turns and will assess your needs and can match you with your own licensed professional therapist in less than 48 hours. It's such a quick turnaround time. You know, and obviously, guys, like, you know, when you need therapy and you need something there and it's tough and you don't know how to navigate it and who should you talk to and all this stuff. Again, like BetterHelp Online Therapy is there and they can absolutely help you. If it's not a crisis line, it's not self-help, it's professional therapy done securely online, and the service is available for clients worldwide. You can schedule these weekly video or phone sessions, so you won't even have to sit in an uncomfortable waiting room as with traditional therapy. BetterHelp's a great way to show up for yourself and invest in your well-being because, well, you deserve some inner peace. Visit betterhelp.com/starting. That's BETTERHEL, BetterHelp, and join the over 2 million people who have taken charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional. There is a special offer for our starting 9 listeners. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/starting. That's 10% off your first month. Go take care of yourself, guys. It's a fucking messed up world. This is a fucked up place. Therapy's helped me before in the past. That shouldn't surprise anybody who's followed me, known me throughout my Barstool career. Therapy's fucking great stuff, man. And I mean that. I shouldn't say it like so casually like that, but it's honestly one of those things. It can be terrifying. It can be intimidating. BetterHelp.com/starting. Get going on the process. Let's get better. Let's get healthy. Let's have a good baseball season here, guys. It's 162 games. It's a grind. So we want you guys staying sharp. Okay, out of the top, Jake, great stuff. Top 5, bottom 5. I do like that. I've been talking so much this Saturday. I think it's time to just take a quick break. Do you want to go to Colin's Corner for a moment?
Let's go to Colin's Corner.
Colin's Corner, we're over to you.
Buster Only came out with a little piece today saying that Steve Cohen is pretty much willing to spend whatever it takes to pick up even if it's a bad contract, just a good player to make it necessary to win a World Series right now. And as that being my owner, going from the Will Ponds to Steve Cohen, it's just like, I can't even express how I've been feeling the last like year and a half with this guy in ownership. Like, just feels good to have him on our side and willing to spend and do whatever it takes. Like we saw it with the Robbie Cano contract. That's a baseball move right there, saying, you know what, make the right choice with it. That's not a, hey, let's worry about my pockets. That's let's do what's best for the team. And I love that.
Jake,
this is the year to do it. This is the year to do it, man. And those 2 games, that doubleheader, those were kind of an indication of some playoff baseball. Those were 2 fun games to watch.
Do you know when you have a good owner, Jake? Are you like in the clubhouse, like you're playing for the Orioles, like this fucking guy?
Oh, well, I mean, yeah. Of course, you know. Yeah. Look, I played for the Orioles from drafted in 07, traded in 2013, and I saw Peter Angelos once, and it was because I was in spring training. I came out of a game after 4 innings, started to do my work, and he had dropped in a helicopter, checked out the facility, and then flew away. So, yeah, you know. For sure.
Fuck, man.
Yeah. How about that? Right. I saw him one time in 7 years.
So there's some context when the MLB PA players union gets together and meets with the owners, and the owners are talking about the state of baseball and stuff. And if there's guys like that lingering around the league, it's like, fuck you, dude. Fuck you. maybe.
You know when you have a good owner.
Okay.
And Colin, to your point, look, if he's saying that kind of stuff, this is the year to do it. And you don't want to win the division by 15 games and then get knocked out by a team that you could have beat by maybe adding a guy or two. So if I'm the Mets, I'm bolstering that rotation or a bullpen arm or somebody off the bench. You got to do it. You do.
Yeah, especially with the age that the Mets are at right now, too. They're the oldest team in the MLB. So, I mean, you're on the pretty much tail end of Scherzer and DeGrom, unfortunately. So, yeah, it's the time to do it now.
Hey, what was I was gonna ask you about some ownership stuff. You want to talk ownership?
Fire. Yeah, go ahead.
So my brain's firing here because I wanted to ask you about this like minor league stuff. I got a great question from a very loyal listener of the show. I'm gonna read this question to you, and this kind of ties, if I can find my fucking phone. This kind of ties into ownership stuff because my understanding is that like owners do have some sort of influence over, if like a minor league clubhouse has a nice spread afterwards, or like if the bus has functioning AC and whatnot. And so here's a question for you. What the hell is with the culture of Major League Baseball rehab assignments? I understand it for pitchers, but Andrew Vaughn, for example, has been out for a week. He hits 2 home runs in Charlotte the other night. And if he's healthy to swing in Charlotte, don't you think he'd be healthy enough to swing in Chicago? Do you see a guy like Steph Curry playing a few G League games to get his timing back? Tom Brady misses a game, so he goes to the USFL. I'll hang up and listen. What's the culture with MLB rehab starts? That's from Jason from Oaklawn.
Well, they don't want to rush a guy back if he's not necessarily ready. And basketball is different than baseball. It's different than, I mean, hitting a baseball is not the same as running up and down the court, playing defense and taking shots. There's no way to compare the two. And it also depends on the injury. What was Vaughn's injury?
I got to look. I think it was soft tissue.
Okay. So soft tissue, what the hell does that mean?
Fucking.
Okay. So say it was a hamstring.
Yeah, that's, I think
you're probably going to have the guy take 2 or 3 at bats, play in the field for several innings and get him out in 4 or 5 or 6 innings. And then you're going to have him run out there and probably do that same thing.
Hand injury.
Once or twice more. Okay. So if it's a hand injury, he needs to get his at bats. What you don't want to have happen is him try to do more than he's capable of at the big league level or push it too hard and re-injure it. So that's why they tend to take it slow. And trust me, the organization wants that player back in the lineup as quick as possible, just like the fans do. So they're going to take their time and make sure that whoever that player is, that he's 100% ready to come back and join the big league club. It might be slightly frustrating from a fan's perspective, but again, like I said, nobody wants them back in the lineup more than the owner, more than the manager, and more than that player himself. But sometimes as a player, we'll try and push it a little bit prematurely, and maybe re-aggravate that injury. So while it might be frustrating, it's in the best interest of that player and the organization.
What about I mean, I hate to go to it, but like the difference between, all right, we're going to go have you do a rehab start and you're going to go to AA or something, or you're going to kind of get on some schedule and, and the fans show up and it's this big thing like, oh, did you hear, John Lackey's starting in fucking Toledo or something, and the whole crowd sells out and the whole town shows up. So to me, like there's that kind of track for pitchers that I think is interesting. And what's the difference between going into the clubhouse with like that mentality versus, you make 7 starts and they're like, hey, we got to send you down to Norfolk to work on this stuff. And then you have to walk into the clubhouse as a AAA as like the big league pitcher that they're sending down to work on stuff. Or like, your time's not there long. They're literally waiting for you to like something to click and like, all right, back up.
Well, so I liked making rehab starts. I liked being around the guys. I didn't like pitching in the game. That was the worst part of it, because you can't set up minor league hitters for the most part. Like, they're swinging at everything and every count, right? You're like, all right, I'm going to go fastball down away. I might throw a sinker in. I'm going to spin a break ball in the dirt. They're taking war hacks at just about anything you can throw up there. I had a rehab start 2014, was with the Cubs, pitched in what is it, the low A team in Florida? Which one is that?
That's the
look it up. Can't remember.
Daytona. Those are the
Daytona. So I was coming back from, I had PRP in the shoulder, started the season a month or so late, maybe 3 weeks. Make a start down there, taking Indocin, which is an anti-inflammatory. I took it on an empty stomach like an idiot. And the night before I started, I was in the bathroom, just kind of laying on the floor in the fetal position, just terrible stomach pains. Everything wasn't sitting on the right foot. So I get up, get ready to go to the field, kind of start to feel a little bit better. First hitter of the game, I think it's the second pitch. He hits a laser off of my left quad. The second guy hits like a 450-foot homer. And I'm like, get me out of here. Like,
rehab start.
Give me a rehab start. Like, get me the hell out of here. So I ended up making it through like 3 or 4 innings, whatever I was supposed to pitch, or I got to my pitch limit, and then I buy the guy's spread and I just get the fuck out of there. Like, it was absolutely miserable. And for whatever reason, rehab starts go like that. You're getting guys' best shot. They're digging in, like, they just can't wait. And I'm just out here trying to get 40, 50 pitches in, like, and they're trying to kill you. So it's a difficult situation from, it might be different as a position player, but man, when you're out there as a pitcher, that they're trying to do everything in their power to take a yard. And it's rough. It is rough. But my favorite thing about it was buying the guy's spread. Like, hey, what do y'all want? Like, pick a steakhouse, whatever, buy the whole team spread. So that was kind of cool, because the spreads in minor leagues are dog shit.
Yeah. Dude, that's so badass. Just like, every day you're eating peanut butter and jelly. Every day you're eating peanut butter sandwiches.
Now today you're getting saltgrass, filet, as much bread as you want, whatever. Yeah. So it's cool for him.
Okay. So before we get to Joe West, I want to talk real quick about our good friends at Game Time. It's the Game Time ticket app that delivers and guarantees lowest price. And there's nothing better when we talk about ad reads and stuff. We put ourselves in the situation. And literally, Jake, you use this Game Time app quite recently.
We use it. We're at the Rangers Red Sox game with my flag football team. The coaches were all trying to buy a big group of tickets for the boys and ourselves. And they asked me, hey, should we go to the ticket window? And I go, no. You need to get the Game Time ticket app. Go on there. I promise you're going to get the cheapest tickets possible. And sure enough, they were $20 cheaper than this option. So Game Time tickets is definitely the place to go for any ticket you could possibly need.
Skip the hassle and enjoy the moment. Download the Game Time app. Go to the account tab to create a login and redeem code starting9 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms obviously apply. Just redeem code starting9 for $20 off under the account tab to create a login. That's starting9 for $20 off. Download Game Time. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Let's get back to the show. We're going to bring in, again, I think this is the first time I've ever interviewed a Hall of Famer. He should be on the Hall of Fame. I think it's like he would be the 10th umpire to make it to the Hall of Fame. In my opinion, certainly deserving. Joins the league in 1976, has umpired more professional games than anybody, has become like a cultural icon, is associated with baseball as much as like you could say. You just say the name, exactly. There's a lot of arguments whether that's a right or wrong thing. But the fact of the matter is this guy put in more time than anybody in the history of his position and in the history of baseball. It's Joe West. Let's get to the interview. Let's bring on the big guy. All right, we are in the interview portion of today's show, and we are very lucky to be joined by Joe West. Joe, thank you so much for making time for us today.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, so off the bat, I'm curious, has Joe Torre ever forgiven you for forcing you to kick his ass in an Atlanta stadium? Did he ever, has he ever called you up and apologized about that yet?
Well, Joe followed me. He was actually following another umpire off the field, and he started to go in the tunnel where we were. And pushed him back, and I said, "You don't belong in here." And so he realized he was, out of line being where he was. Went back to the dugout. And of course, when the reporters got to him, he said he pushed me. He pushed me. So when the reporters got to me, I said, "Yeah, I pushed him." So anyway, Joe got fined for that, and I got a couple days off, so I went to Lake Tahoe. But yeah, we had our run-ins when he was a major and a player. That's the funny thing. I had Joe Torre when he was a player, so I've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then he got the job as a director of on-field operations, and he became our boss. And I think he even made a statement at one time. Now I can get back at a few of them. So.
Now, is it true, Joe, that fight was broken up with a fire extinguisher?
No.
That's not true, huh?
No. There's a lot of stories out there that have been made up over the years, and I think what they do is they pick the easy names to put them to. I remember one guy from ESPN said I used to call pitches, and if it was a rookie pitcher, I'd wait till he threw one right down the middle and call it a ball and see how he reacted. I never did that, but I know an umpire that did, but that wasn't me. So a lot of these things have been stretched over the course of years, but it's really funny. I was sitting in the locker room in spring training one time. They were interviewing Jim McKean, and you probably didn't have Jim McKean because he was an older umpire in the American League. And the reporter asked Jim, he says, "You ever try to get back at a player?" And I could see that Jim was kind of stumped at what was asked of him. And I said, "If you have to do something to get back at a player, to do something illegal or immoral, then you should have kicked him out." And of course, Jim jumped right on that because that should be your answer. You should never hold a grudge in this job. You're going to have situations where you're going to have arguments. You're going to have situations where people lose their temper. But you cannot hold a grudge because you're being dishonest to the game. And I've always said this, and I used to say it to every young umpire that would come up. You have three responsibilities. Your first responsibility is to the game of baseball. And that doesn't necessarily mean the commissioner's office. And your second responsibility, your profession. And that doesn't mean the umpires union. And your third responsibility is to do what you know in your heart is morally honest and correct. And if you do those things in that order, nothing you do will be wrong. Now, that don't mean they won't try to kill you for it, but right. Nothing you do will be wrong.
Well, I think some of that might come as a surprise to some people hearing you say that. But from a player's perspective, that's exactly how I would feel for you to answer that question. Some people think you would hold a grudge. Outside looking in.
And you can't do that. I've worked with umpires who did hold grudges. I worked with umpires who would call other umpires and say, "Get this guy." And I'd say, "I'm not going to do that. It's not my place. If you had a problem with him, you should have handled it yourself, because each day is a new day." If you look at the funny thing about that is, here's Bobby Cox got kicked out more than any manager in baseball. And the next day it was a new day. He didn't carry a grudge. He didn't carry anything. He did his job the day of whatever was happening. And the next day came out, it was a new day. And we should all learn from it. I learned from Doug Harvey, who's a Hall of Fame umpire. He said, he came down one day because I had chased a ball player to first base screaming at him. And it was on ball 4. I'd call ball 4 on Dave Kingman. And he said something smart aleck about a pitch 2 pitches earlier. So I'm running down the first base after him, chasing him and screaming at him. And between him and Doug Harvey walked down and said, "Hey, don't let them ruin your day. Do your job. You're doing a great job. If something gets out of line, handle it and be done with it. But don't let them ruin your day." And it was like the light going on. It's like you walk in a room, somebody turned the light on. Now you can see everything. And it made so much sense. You got to realize, especially when you're an umpire, that every ball player is trying to win. And I don't know that I've seen in any other sport a more competitive nature of the athlete that's playing the game. I think baseball players are more competitive than any ball players I've ever seen in any other sport. And your job is, first of all, to control the game and to make people respect what it is. And so you have a duty to your profession and to the sport itself to do that. And I think that's very important. I think a lot of people overlook that and they go, oh, he doesn't like me. You know, the funniest thing about replay, where they grab their ears now, they go to replay, you know. The players now realize the umpires are trying to get the play right. Years ago, you call a guy out and he said, he called me out because he didn't like me. Well, that's the furthest thing from the truth. And you know, the years that you played, what were you in the big leagues? 12, 13 years?
12 seasons. Yeah.
12 seasons. And there are times where you didn't even know who the umpire was. And then there are times you knew who the umpire was as soon as he walked on the field. But when I first came up, the ball players were talking to each other. What's he like? Can you talk to him? Can you say anything to him? Is it all right to argue with him? I mean, they would do all those things in the dugout. I said, has anybody had this guy before? And I think they're getting away from that. Of course, now that you're umpiring both leagues, there's some umpires you won't see all season because they don't get to certain cities. And of course, when I first came up, there were no time off. There was no vacation. There was no replay where you're off the field for 3 weeks. So we were working every day. But then again, you know, the players knew who you were. They knew they could say hello. They knew what to say to you. And if you'll notice, in all the ejections you've ever seen in baseball, most of them, the players kick themselves out. It's not the umpires kicking them out. It's usually
What does that mean?
Well, they know what they can and can't say. They know what they can and can't do. There's a deportment out there. And so you got to understand that, and I actually said this to the Players Association one time. I was with Tony Clark and Torrey was there, Manfred was there. And I said, I probably kicked out more ball players than anybody you have on the staff because I was there longer than anybody else. And I said, but I didn't kick any one of them out. They kicked themselves out. They did it to themselves. Mm-hmm. And it's like, let's put it in perspective. Let's say you have a little boy and he's 7, 8 years old. He's playing on a little league team or a small fry team, and he gets called out, and he throws his bat, he throws his helmet. I mean, we are representatives of baseball. We are supposed to be an example for these kids growing up. And I can remember one time I was with Charles Barkley at a banquet, and he had made this statement. This is back when he was playing. He says, I don't want to be a role model. And Harry Callis and I took him aside and said, Charles, you don't have a choice. You're a role model whether you want to be or not. You don't get to make that decision when you become part of the public eye.
And were you just playing golf with Charles, or
no,
you guys
it
out
was
to dinner or something?
It was a Philadelphia Sports Writers banquet. And I was one of the speakers there. In fact, I was the only umpire that was ever invited back twice. So I must have been pretty funny. So, yeah. But and Charles took it to heart, and it didn't hurt that Harry Callis was there, and I knew Charles from playing in some golf tournaments. But you see Charles today, he comes down here to Lakeland for Andy Bean's golf tournament. And they bring kids out from the high schools, and he sits them down and lectures them. You'd be so proud of the way he talks to these kids now, you couldn't believe it's the same person. And he's excellent around. He tells me you have to get an education. He said, you kids are not going to grow up and be able to watch basketball like I do and have a job that pays you well just to watch basketball and talk about it. He said, you have to get an education and you have to get ahead in life. You cannot go out in life with no education and no skills. You have to make something of yourself. He's excellent with the kids. And of course, Jake, you've seen it. You grew up in Texas where, you know,
yep.
It's a different world. I think I'm surprised that with the way our economy is going, Texas hadn't seceded so far.
I'll tell you, they're thinking about it. You always hear people around the neighborhood and in Texas talking about it, but hopefully that doesn't happen. But you're right.
Yeah, let's hope so, man. I mean, that's a pretty big deal, right? We don't want that to happen. It's a big deal.
I mean, look, yeah, but I'm represent Texas through and through. You see the shirt, you see the flags in the background, but back to Charles, like you said, being a role model, you don't have a choice. It's kind of part of the job description when when you're under the bright lights, you put that jersey on, and it seems like he's matured over time for sure. Still funny as hell.
Oh,
I hope he never loses that.
Yeah, he's not afraid to say anything, but
Yeah.
he's changed his tune there, and he realized it. I mean, one of the people we brought up back then when we were talking to him was, look at Joe DiMaggio. I mean, he's been retired 20, 30 years by the time Charles got there, and he was Mr. Coffee. And people loved him. And Joe was one of the worst people in the world about signing autographs for anybody. He was terrible. You couldn't get him to sign anything. And yet, he was at the All-Star game I had in Oakland, and my wife at the times asked him to sign a baseball for my mom and dad. And of course, security's pushing her away and everything. And Joe looked there and said, who's mom and dad? She said, the third base umpire. He said, give me the ball. I mean, you know, sometimes it's just putting him in the right realm or putting him in a comfort zone. But had he signed baseballs in the stands there, those people in Oakland would have mobbed him. So I get that. I understand that. And Johnny Bench was terrible about signing autographs because when he'd sign one, the line would be out the door. So there were places he couldn't go when he played because he'd be mobbed. He couldn't have dinner anywhere.
Yeah.
You know.
Do you think that bothers those guys, you know, as they're playing and they're having all this success, that a lot of people don't see that side where it's difficult to kind of fit back into normal life?
Yeah, I'm sure it does. You know, when Jake played in Chicago, he had people follow him around everywhere he went, you know.
Yeah, can we talk about that?
Absolutely. He's going to tell you the same thing. Wherever he went, they knew who he was.
Well,
People in Chicago were different, though. A little bit different. They had a better feel about it. They'd come up to you at the right times and just say, hey, man, want to say hello. Huge fan of what you've done in Chicago. And they'd keep it moving. But then, you know, sometimes in some other places, you'd run into some weirdos that just come up to you on FaceTime with their cousin, say, hey, man, talk to my cousin, say what's up. I'm like, hey, like, not the best time, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, but hey, it's part of the territory, and I absolutely loved it. I got to take you back real quick to what you said about players getting themselves thrown out. When I was on the mound and I'm watching the conversation between you and the hitter, every damn pitch, is that a strike, is that a ball? And then as soon as I say something to an umpire, we get heat for it, right? Is it because there's that distance in between us, or is it just more of a common thing where the hitter and the umpire can have that back and forth? Because as soon as, like I said, if we did it, then the mask comes off, not another word.
Yeah.
What do you got on that?
Well, see, that's a problem because you're the center of attention. The hitter looking back on a pitch, the ball's going back from the catcher to the pitcher. The hitter says something, that I thought that ball was outside. And if he doesn't look back, the umpire can answer whatever he's going to say, and then there's nothing done there. But if a pitcher throws a pitch and then acts like he's fallen off the mound because he didn't like the call, then that's a little bit different. I can remember Gary Carter, when he caught, he never shut up. He was talking from the first pitch to the last pitch of the game. And he had two different strike zones. He had one when he caught, and he had one when he hit. So, and you never knew if he was upset about it because he never changed his attitude of what he said. You know, Jerry Grody, when he caught, if he thought you missed a pitch, he'd throw it back to the pitcher so hard it knocked the pitcher off the mound. He never said a word to the umpire. And if you missed a pitch with Jerry Grody catching you, it was your fault because he let you see everything. And then you turn around and you got a catcher like Johnny Bench. He was so big, he couldn't move. He had to sit right behind the middle of the plate so the umpire could see. Because if he moved anywhere inside, you couldn't see because he was just a big guy. And he had this mullet head, you know, he had a great big head. So these are two of the best catchers I ever saw. And one of them would let you see every pitch, and the other one was trying to get out of your way so you could see it. So there's a lot going on there. And
what about catcher rivalries, Joe?
What do you mean?
So, you know, a guy that you have beef with but who's good or something that, you know, would kind of early on the home plate, maybe some bad beef over the years or something, or were you pretty good at smoothing those things over? I'm saying, like, did you have any rivalries with, like, historic catchers where it was like you knew the second they got behind home plate they were going to be giving you an earful?
No, there was some chronic complainers, but you forget whether you want to admit it or not, the umpire is the judge, jury, and executioner during the ball game. There's no other authority out there, and it was designed that way so that everybody got a fair shake. And it's and that's another hard thing and I think Jake's alluding to that is you can't be badge heavy. And what I mean by that, you can't push your authority on anybody. You have to be fair to everybody, and you have to be able to listen. Sometimes, and I can see it because when I was first coming up, I couldn't believe anybody would argue with me. Why are you arguing with me? I got that play right, but you don't understand that they may have a different angle. They may have seen something you didn't see. So, and it takes a while to get settled in where the player is going to respect what you're doing. So, we had some catchers who were difficult to deal with, but and we had managers that way too. I remember Chuck Tanner when he managed the Pirates. He picked on every young umpire that came to the big leagues until the umpire stood his ground, and whether he threw him out or told him off, Chuck would back off. But he wanted to see how far he could go with each new umpire, and that's just him doing his job. Dick Williams, on the other hand, Dick Williams said one day at home plate, he said, "I don't care what you call. If it goes against me, I'm coming out there." And sure enough, that day, his third baseman had a rundown, and he threw the ball to second base, and he didn't get out of the runner's way. The runner ran right into him. We called obstruction, put the guy on third. Before Dick could get to the dirt on the infield, I said, "Well, you said you were coming out here." So he got kicked out right away. But he was a good manager. And
Never got fired, right?
Oh, yeah. Dick Williams got fired. The guy that didn't get fired was Earl Weaver. Earl never got fired.
And what was he like?
Well, he didn't finish a single game I was in.
Not one, huh?
No, not one. I only had him twice, and they were both in spring training.
Oh, man. He's trying to play golf. That's what he's doing. Well, man, you obviously love the game, or you wouldn't have umpired as long as you do, or as long as you did. Do you miss doing it? And how much baseball do you still watch?
Oh, I'll turn it on to see what play happened. I think the coolest thing about this job, Jake, was that you're witnessing, and sometimes you're part of a piece of history every day. And some days are bigger than others. I mean, I can remember when I first came up, I had Pete Rose's consecutive games hitting streak. I was at first base when he tied the record, and I was at home plate when he broke the record, and it was in New York. So that was a big to-do. My first year, I think I had Willie McCovey's 500th home run. And the only reason I knew that is because I saw it on the scoreboard. And I'm thinking, 500 home runs, that's a lot, And then a few years later, I had Nolan Ryan's 5th no-hitter in the Astrodome. And it was the ugliest no-hitter you ever saw. He was all over the place. And he was so wild, people were scared to get in the box. And he threw a no-hitter against the Dodgers. The Dodgers went on to win the World Series that year, but Nolan Ryan threw his 5th no-hitter against the Los Angeles Dodgers. So, and didn't you had a couple no-hitters too, didn't you?
I only threw 2. Yeah, unfortunately, only 2.
Well, 2 is a lot more than a lot of other people have thrown. So you have to look at it.
I'm happy with it.
Yeah.
The first one was about as good as I could throw a baseball, and the second one kind of sloppy. Had some walks, just soft contact. Got a little lucky, but I'll take it.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely. And you got to realize that's a piece of history that no one can take away from you. And that's the wonderful part of this game is you grow up as a little kid and you're thinking, I want to be a big leaguer. I want to be Mickey Mantle or Willie Mays or whoever. But the coolest thing about it is it's typically American. You got to hit a round ball with a cylindrical bat, and you got to hit it square, and then you got to hit it where they can't catch it. and the uniqueness of all that is if the guy fails 7 out of 10 times, he's still got a shot at getting in the Hall of Fame. There's no other sport where your percentages are like that. They give a pitcher four balls to throw at the hitter. They only give the hitter 3. So it's a game of successes and failures, and whoever, succeeds the most usually wins. I have noticed that the teams that play like teams usually end up winning. I've seen situations where the team didn't have as much talent as the other team, but because they played good heads-up baseball, they ended up fighting it out and being successful. And then I've seen teams where I'll give you a good example. Reggie Jackson never hit 300 but one time in his career. But any given day, Reggie could beat you by himself. Mm-hmm. I mean, he could beat you with a double in the gap or a home run or throw a guy out. You know, any given day, he could beat you right by himself. And yet, you know, a lot of times he was resented where he went to. When he went to the Yankees, I think Thurman Munson hated him. But he was like the straw that stirred the drink, you know. And then you got teams like the Big Red Machine from the 70s when I first came up. They were unbelievable. They had no pitching, but they had the best 8 players you could put on the field. I mean, they had a Hall of Famer behind the plate. They had a Hall of Famer at first base. They had a Hall of Famer at second base. And the shortstop was the best shortstop in the game, Concepcion. Pete Rose played third. George Foster got 150 RBIs every year he was there. Geronimo was the center fielder, and he was arguably the best defensive outfielder in the game. And Ken Griffey Sr. was the right fielder. I mean, they were loaded, but they'd win games 11-9, you know, 7-5. Because they had no pitching, and they called their manager, Sparky Anderson, they called him Captain Hook. They said he's brilliant about taking people out. No, he wasn't brilliant. His pitching was terrible. He was having to get them out of there.
Yeah.
Hey,
well,
speaking
I think
of
baseball is the ultimate team sport, Joe, and you can't hide flaws.
Yeah. No.
162 games, you deal with adversity, you deal with injuries. The best team typically rises to the top every single year, and it's not always the most talented team.
No, but now that they put the playoffs in like it is, the team that gets hot at the end has a very good shot at going all the way. A good example of how that didn't happen was last year when the Cardinals had that successful run at the playoffs, and nobody could beat them until they got to the playoffs. And then the one-game playoff, they got beat because they had the wild card game. Then they didn't get by the Dodgers. The guy hit a home run last inning to beat them. And that you look at how everything built up to that. And the Dodgers shouldn't even been in that game because they won, 105 games, and the Giants won one more. I mean, they won over 100 games and had to play the wild card to get to the next level. So sometimes momentum helps. I think the year you guys won the World Series against Cleveland, if you don't have a rain delay, the momentum had shifted to the Indians. You remember at the end?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll never forget standing at first base last year, and Schwarber and Rizzo, they're playing for 2 different teams now. They said, "Joe, you know the greatest call you ever made?" And I said, "No." And they said, "That rain delay in Cleveland." You got the tarp back on the field. We had a meeting. We got fired up. And he said, "That's the greatest call you ever made, was a 16-minute rain delay." So
the Cleveland Indians fans give you the business about that?
Well, I told you earlier, you know, I had the last 2 World Series that a Chicago team won. I had both of them. The last 2 World Series losses that the Cleveland Indians had, I had both of them too. So they're not real happy with me.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of happiness, I wanted to ask you about maybe the relationship between you and Jake. I did some number crunching before the show, and I don't know if you know this, Joe, but with a minimum of career 5 starts, you have the worst ERA for Jake Arrieta in his career of all umpires at 6.29. I'm going to read off some numbers to you. He made 5 starts with you behind the plate. He pitched 24 1/3 innings. He struck out 18. He walked 12. Again, a 6.29 ERA, registered a 2-2 record. A 2-2 record despite a 1.849 whip, which, Jake, would not get you out of single A these days. So,
Are you done? Are you done?
I'm just saying,
Oh,
you were terrible. And, Joe, I don't know, do you remember him being that bad, or do you have fonder memories?
I think you're the reason they depend on analytics too much today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, stand up for the player. I was just wanting to open up some dialogue and see if you have fond memories of Jake pitching, or was he, a guy where you're like, I don't know what I'm going to get from him today?
No, he's the kind of guy you wanted to pitch. It's one of my biggest blow-ups ever in Chicago was with Mark Burley, because he balked trying to pick a guy off, and then he did it again later. And I had to kick him and Ozzie Guillen out of the game. No one wants to kick that kind of guy out of the game because he gets the ball, he pitches fast. No, everybody, when Jake Arrieta worked, everybody wanted to work the plate because he got the ball and he threw strikes, and that's who you want to have. So I'm sorry his statistics were bad the day I was there, but it wasn't because I had a grudge against him. And again, he's the kind of pitcher that you look at, and I never did that because I really didn't want to know who was pitching. I wanted to go out there fresh. But if you look up there and you got Jake Arrieta and you got Steve Carlton and you got Randy Jones and you got Tom Seaver, give me the plate. I'm ready, because that's who you want. You want the guys that are competitors.
And Carl, Joe wasn't the guy with the bat in his hand. So, I can't put any blame on Joe. But I don't know if you remember this interaction. You probably do. You were umpiring first base. I was pitching the next day. The game's over. Everybody's walking into the tunnel. I see you're coming close to me. I go, Joe, you better get some sleep tonight, man. I need you sharp. And you go, I don't need sleep to call that weak shit you're throwing. like you son of a bitch. All right, that's a good response. All right, I'll see you tomorrow. But no, man, Joe, I'd always loved having you out there. I feel like you were a showman. You and I never had an issue, and I knew you were just out there doing your job to the best of your ability.
Well, it was a great career, and you had a great career too. I mean, there again, you threw 2 no-hitters. There's a lot of people that are never going to throw one, and they played a long time. It's amazing, and you should be very proud of what you did. And I'm sure you and your family, everybody's proud of it. I mean, because it was a wonderful career.
My family is proud. They're actually trying to figure out how to handle dealing with me more often now, being home so much. How have you made that transition? You filling the time with some other activities? You doing a lot of podcasting? What's going on with you?
Well, I am doing a podcast, and we should have you on that podcast because it's
anytime.
It's called 5460, which is the number of regular season games I worked, which is more than anybody in baseball. And it's called the Joe West Podcast. The first episode we had was with Mike Claiborne, who I think is listening to this. And Mike is like the host, and I'm just there to get in the way because he knows what he's doing, like trying to figure out all these mechanical things. And we did a session with Rick Hummel, who's a Hall of Fame sports writer. We did one with Larry Gatlin. I think what we're trying to do is show that umpires are real human beings, and we got people lined up to do these things. We got the Oak Ridge boys going to come on in a week or so. We've got, this is a good one, Jackie Autry, Gene Autry's wife, has agreed to do one of these with us. So, and we do one a week. This week was Rick Hummel. The second week was Mark Grace, and we convinced Kelly Chase to come on and talk with us too, because Kelly played hockey in the minor leagues at the same time Grace was in the minor leagues. And it was hilarious. Just to put those two together was just funny. So, but we've got a good setup coming, and we're going to do 26 of these. And I'm looking forward to it because it's going to be fun. I told Mike from the beginning, I said, this has to be fun or I'm not doing it. He said it will be. And so we're looking forward to it. We did one with Hawk Harrelson, and he was funny because he is the biggest homer that ever lived. He pulled for the White Sox when he was, and actually Hawk, I think, was the GM for the White Sox for a little while.
No, yeah, he absolutely was. He fired Tony La Russa. He's considered one of the worst general managers in the history of Major League Baseball.
Well, I wish I'd have known that. I'd have used that. You know who else? We had Jerry Reinsdorf on.
No.
Yeah. We had
He
Jerry.
doesn't do interviews. He doesn't do media. Jerry doesn't
Yeah.
sit down with people.
I know, and the people in Chicago are mad that I had enough pull to get him to come on, but he was, and it's interesting because he shared a story with us. He said he went to buy the Chicago Bulls, and they weren't a very good team at the time he went to buy them. And he said we drafted this guy named Michael Jordan, who had only averaged 18 points a season as a college player. And the scouting report on him was he's probably not going to average 18 points as a pro. So anyway, Jerry says, you know, if they'd have known what they had, I'd have never had enough money to buy that team. And I said, well, you know, the only guy that held Michael under 20 points, and that was Dean Smith, his college coach. So, but he got to talking about that. That was a cute interview with him. So.
Yeah, sounds like a good guest list. Sounds like you're keeping busy. And do you still do stuff with umpires? I understand you have this kind of maybe behind-the-scenes reputation that maybe the public doesn't know so much about your commitment to helping younger umpires, or there's stories of you asking the league office to staff you with guys that needed to do better on the scoring and stuff. Do you still find yourself connected to the game that way?
Well, if they call me and ask me to help these kids, I will. I mean, there's so many things I can help them with, but so many things I can't. I had a kid ask me one day, he said, how do you take plays at first base? And I said, I can't help you with that because I've been doing this so long. When the shortstop or the third baseman throws the ball, I can tell if it's on line because I've done it enough. Until you can do that, I can't help you. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, the ball's in the hole and the shortstop picks it up. As soon as he throws it, it's 6 feet out of his hand. I can tell if it's on line or not. You can't do that until you have had the experience that I've had. So there's certain things like that I can't help them with, but there are other things that I can help them. If they ask, I'll help them. I'm more than glad to do it because, the guy that tutored me when I was coming up was a guy named Al Barlick. And he was funny. He said, you should try to help every umpire you can be the best that he can be. He said, because you're helping the profession of baseball. And, that's what I preached my entire life. And the second thing is you may have to work with him. So you don't want him to be in trouble because if he's in trouble, your whole crew's in trouble.
Joe, I had a question for you about that. If the throw's online or offline, now, does that mean that you're not necessarily, if it's going to be offline, you're not paying as close attention to that because there's not going to be a play at first?
No, what I mean by offline is that at the first baseman where he can stretch to catch it. If it's offline and he has to go up the baseline, you have to change your positioning to see whether he tagged him or not. It's like a play at home plate. You see these kids today, they'll move around to where they're at the third baseline extended. Well, that's a progression over the years of where they want you to be, because when I was first coming up, they wanted you at a 90-degree angle looking down the first baseline. Well, how many times have you seen the runner get between the tag of the catcher where the umpire can't see it? So you have to be able to look down his arm to see whether he tagged him or not. And the first time that happened to me in the big leagues, I remember asking John Kibler, I said, how do you take that play? He said, if he goes up the line, follow him. Just mirror his back so that you can look down his arm, how he tagged him or not. And again, it's one of those things where the light came on. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But I didn't learn that until I got to the big leagues. And we should be teaching that to kids who are in AA and AAA. We shouldn't wait till they get to the big leagues to teach them that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And if you were a commissioner and you saw the challenges that are facing our game today, what would you address first? Because there are a lot of obstacles and things that people are trying to change and manipulate, maybe for good or for not so good. What do you see as our biggest obstacles within the game today?
The biggest obstacle in the game of baseball today is they don't play the World Series in the daytime. We have a whole generation of people that are not baseball fans because they don't watch the World Series. because the games start too late. My biggest, and the media people hated me for this because I didn't have any time of day for them. My biggest problem with the media was that television has no right running the game. You should never play a baseball game at 4 p.m. where the shadows are going to affect the hitters and the way the game is played and pitched. But we do it because of television. Oh, we want this in prime time. Excuse me. It's prime time somewhere all the time. So if the game's on the West Coast, let's say you have Anaheim and Oakland or San Francisco and the Dodgers, that game should start at 1 o'clock or 7 o'clock. Does that make sense? Because now everybody can see. I mean, you can't let television dictate what's going on. And they say, well, they're paying the freight. Well, you know what? I was in New York and we had the Dodgers and the Mets. And Bart Giamatti was the league president. And Peter Ubroth was the commissioner. And the game's going to get rained out. There's no way we're going to play. So the television people went to Bart Giamatti and says, we have to have this at prime time tomorrow night. And I heard him say that. And I'm working with Harry Wendelstedt and Paul Runge and I forget who else, but I mean, there's 6 of us here. And when they said the game has to be prime time, I said, Bart, and this is the commission, I said, Bart, if we play prime time, you're going to have to charter a plane for us to get to Los Angeles for the next game. So now Bart's back's against the wall because television is saying he's got to play at 8 o'clock at night. Well, if we play at 8 o'clock at night, we can't get to the West Coast for the next game. There are no flights. So he looks at Ubroth and he says, and Ubroth was the commissioner. He says, what I do? He says, tell them the game's going to be at 1 o'clock tomorrow. And if you want to televise it, to be here. And that was it. We played at 1 o'clock the next day.
So that's the biggest challenge. That's the biggest obstacle.
Well,
World Series during the day.
Well, I think that to get more kids involved, more kids to appreciate it, you have to look at it in that fashion. That it's like you got a good product, but if nobody sees it, how is the younger generation going to enjoy it? And they're not going to do that because there's too much money involved. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't matter what you and I say right here. There's too much money involved for them to move it.
I agree with you on that.
They've used this little box for the umpiring on TV, and it's not the same box that the umpires are getting to be graded on.
Why can't we get the same box? Why
I have no idea why that's happening like that. I had an umpire come to me years ago, about 3 years ago, Andy Fletcher. I'll never forget this. He said, I thought I had a good game last night, and the machine said I missed 6 pitches. I said, well, that's funny. I was working second base. I didn't see a pitch that anybody could even argue. And nobody did argue that night, right? So I said, how many did the machine miss? And what I meant by that is how many did the machine not track? He said, 14. And I said, let me get this straight. We're going to use the machine to call balls and strikes that missed twice as many pitches as you did. And he started laughing. But see, wow, that's another thing. You want to use a robotic umpire. They've proved that the robot misses 7% of the pitches. We don't have an umpire on the grading system we have that's missing 5%.
The robot misses 7% of pitches, Joe. That's real?
Yeah.
It seems absurd that we're even talking about considering using that. Then.
Well, a lot of it has to do that they've instituted the gambling. They have to send the lineup cards to Vegas so they can put the line on the game 30 minutes before the game. Mm-hmm. And I'm not so sure that's a good idea to have gambling involved anyway. But there again, it's more money.
Yeah, that's coming.
It's more money. They have one. I think they get 1% of everything that's bet in Vegas on baseball. That's a big chunk of money.
Oh yeah, yeah. How often did you get approached by like the mob or something throughout your career? Like, hey, this game, this series? You're in New York having some pasta. Some
You know,
cocktails up there
I
in the
knew
hotel.
I knew some people that dealt with it and would talk about it and would say, "What would it take?" I said, "You don't have enough money," and then again, I've been in places where we had an umpire that said, "Oh, the guy pitching tomorrow, he doesn't get along with me. I don't get along with him." And the next night, sure enough, the pitcher got knocked out, and the same umpire went back into the nightclub, and all his drinks were free. And he said, "Well, what are you doing?" And he said, "Well, you came in here last night and said that pitcher didn't like you and you didn't like him. And so one of these gambling guys over here, he went and bet a bunch of money on him to lose. So he's buying all your drinks tonight." But and that's sad that someone picked up on that. And the umpire had nothing to do with it. He just went out and did his job, the best he could. And of course the guy got beat. But anyway, things like that do happen. They're looking for an edge. I can remember when the first sheet came out judging umpires as to what they call balls and strikes and whatever. And it was a Vegas line on the umpires. And I looked at it and I realized right away what it was because it came out early in the season. And all the senior umpires, their over and under was low. And all the junior umpires were higher by a run here and there. You know what I'm saying? And my friend that took me to the ballpark showed me the line. I said, "Well, this is just a bogus report." He says, No, they got this in Vegas. There's people betting on it. I said, "Well, look at it. Look at Doug Harvey and Frank Pulley and John Kibler and so on." Well, they were the senior umpires in the league. They were the lower of the over and under because they're getting the starting pitching. They're getting the ace, the two pitcher, maybe the three pitcher, but they're getting the best pitching. So the fourth and fifth pitcher is going to the third and fourth umpire. So they're naturally going to score more runs off them. And so he's at the ballpark that day, and I got Fernando Valenzuela, and I think Steve Carlton. No, it was Dwight Gooden. Fernando Valenzuela and Dwight Gooden are pitching. That's got to be an under game, right? Mm-hmm. 11 to 9 with the score. So when I get back to the car, the guy that gave me the sheet said he's there like looks like he lost his firstborn kid, because he called his bookie and he placed a bet, that was going to be an under game. It's 11 to 9.
Oops.
Yeah.
Hey, do you think Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame?
I think if Pete would clean up his act, they'd welcome him. But Pete's, part of being in the Hall of Fame, I think you have to be a good guy. So like we were talking about Charles Barkley, if he'd just be a good guy and make himself Ubroth tried to get him to do that. I don't think everybody knows this, but Bart Giamatti suspended him. But Ubroth was the commissioner that caught him. And Ubroth went to him and said, "Pete, you just sit out 1 year, we'll treat you like Alex Karras and Paul Horning, and you'll be suspended for 1 year for gambling. You go to Gamblers Anonymous. You come to us with your hat in your hand and apologize, and we'll put you back in a year." And Pete said,
"You wouldn't do it."
Pete said, "I'll take my chances with Bart." And Giamatti threw the book at him. And you got to realize, Ubroth was a realist. He didn't want to suspend Pete. He didn't want Pete to miss any time. But Giamatti was the romanticist. He was like the scholar, and he made a mistake, So, and that's why he got suspended for life like that. And it was a mistake. And they named one of the streets in Cincinnati Pete Rose Way because he's an icon in that town. But I think part of being in the Hall of Fame, you have to be a good guy. You have to show that your love of the game is more than the love of yourself. And I think if he would show that, I think he could certainly go in. Here's a guy that if you scouted him today, you wouldn't sign him. He didn't have strong enough arm. He wasn't fast enough. He didn't hit with the power that you're looking for. you'd never sign the guy. But yet, when he left the Reds and he went to the Phillies, he taught them how to win because they had a great team. They just didn't know how to win. I mean, I was at third base one day and Mike Schmidt swung at a ball in the dirt. And he just kind of walked back to the dugout. Strike three, he swung at the ball in the dirt. Well, Pete got up on the top step of the dugout, started yelling at him, go, run, run. You know, I mean, nobody yelled at Mike Schmidt. Pete Rose did. And before the season was over, they won everything. I think it was 1980. They won the World Series. And they won the World Series because Pete taught them how to win. They always had a good team. They just didn't know how to close the deal.
I bet you saw some pretty heated exchanges between Pete and some other players, huh?
You know, when he became a manager, I actually heard him say on the field, I don't want to be out here. I don't like taking up for players that can't play. He actually said that on the field. But, and he was a feisty guy. But the only umpire I saw him have a tiff with was Dave Pallone. And he pushed Pallone. He got suspended for it. But he was usually pretty good with the umpires.
What about between players? Like the most heated exchange you saw amongst, say a hitter and a catcher or a hitter and a pitcher. And did you like to see benches clear?
No.
Did it kind of get you going a little bit?
We had to go break them up. What are you talking about?
Yeah, well, in my opinion, I think you should just kind of let it settle down the way it will naturally.
If you could
kind of just watch.
Yeah, if you can break it up immediately, you go ahead and try to do it. But for the most part, that's one of the toughest things because 4 umpires can't break up 50 players. You can't do it.
No way.
I mean, it just doesn't happen. I was in New York when the Phillies and the Mets got in a fight. Every time Darryl Strawberry got near the pile, Darren Dalton knocked him down. And I mean, it was a mess. And I pulled this pitcher named Dennis Cook out of a pile because he was trying to rip this guy's leg off. And he tried to take a swing at me. So when he did, I just backed out of the way and I threw him and he went down in a heap. And I went over and got in front of him and said, I'm the guy that threw you down. You calm down. And it was over. He didn't do anything else. And so we were going to kick the players out of the game. And of course, the only thing the media got on the deal was me throwing this player on the ground. And so they interviewed me after the game and they said, well, you think there'll be any discipline with this fight? And I said, yeah, I could use a few days off. And I wasn't trying to hurt the kid. I was just trying to get him out of the pile. And he didn't know that I had him because I had him from behind. So, but there was a little turmoil over that. But for the most part, they're the hardest things we have to do is to try to judge when to stop something and when not. And not that I don't think there are times when you should throw at a player. I think when someone tries to show you up, you should hit him in the ribs. I don't see. I think baseball has policed itself very well for a lot of years, and sometimes it's best to let the players handle it. But then there are times when they're throwing at somebody's head that gets a little more dangerous. So.
Yeah. So
And
what does
that's
that
my
look
view
like
on
for
the whole
you
thing,
asking
too.
Oh, sorry, Jake. I'm
No,
sorry.
you're good. I was just going to say, if you can handle it appropriately, then by all means. And one other thing I was going to ask you with the warnings, it seems like certain guys have very short leashes with the warnings or don't understand how to address those or hand those out effectively. It was probably a week or so ago. I saw a guy, I think it was a guy for the Blue Jays. It hit a guy on a 1-0 fastball, hit Donaldson in a tie game in the 8th inning. Obviously unintentional, and he tossed the guy out of the game without warning. So, what's your take on how umpires are handling that currently?
Well, they've changed a lot of that, and it's sometimes they're not educating the players as to what's going on. But I remember the pitch, and I don't think he was throwing to that guy there because the game was on the line, you know.
Yeah.
But they told him that if you think they throw at him intentionally, to eject him, period. And sometimes that's a mistake. There's all kinds of stories about the old guys like Gibson and stuff like that. One of my favorite stories about throwing at a hitter was Greg Maddux had thrown at the other team, and we just started interleague play, and we had this umpire named Chuck Merriweather, one of the younger umpires in the American League at the time, and actually we were already working both leagues, so he wasn't an American League umpire anymore, but he had come up as an American League umpire. And Maddux had hit somebody on the other team, and he comes to bat, and he says, "Now look, this guy is going to throw at me and hit me with the pitch, and you are not to do anything. And I'm going to go to first base and not say a word." This is Greg Maddux talking to the plate umpire. And Chuck Merriweather said, "I don't think you understand, Greg." Said, "If this guy throws and hits you right now, and I don't do anything, I won't be here very long." There's, and I saw Maddux one day, he struck out Vince Coleman, and Coleman turned around to argue with the umpire who was behind the plate, was a young kid. And Greg yelled at him. He said, "He didn't strike you out, I did. If you want another, I'll give you another one." And the bench is empty on the field. It was a mess.
It's a different ball game in the National League too. If you're hitting guys as a starting pitcher or a pitcher in general, you know you got to come up to the plate. It seems to not happen as often, or it did. What was your experience with that?
Well, the DH,
is that noticeable?
The DH was put in the early 70s because they wanted the veteran ball players in the American League to get a couple more years under their belt or a couple more at bats or whatever. It was a bad rule when they put it in, and it's a bad rule now. Best example I can give you is when Roger Clemens pitched in the American League. He would throw at his mother. He didn't care who was it. He would throw at anybody. He goes over to Houston to play in the National League. This is before they switched leagues. And now he's pitching in the National League, and he didn't hit anybody all year.
He wouldn't do it.
Because he had the bat.
You got to stand your ass in that box. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's one reason not to have it. The other reason is if you have a DH, they don't go after the 7th, 8th, and 9th hitter. I've always said that if Tom Seaver threw more than 9 pitches to the 7th, 8th, and 9th hitter, one of them fouled off a 2-strike pitch because he went right after him. Because the 3rd hitter, the 9th hitter, is the pitcher. So he would go right after the 7th, 8th, and 9th hitter. In the American League, you don't have the pitcher hitting last. So they pitch the 7th, 8th, and 9th hitter like they're Jimmy Fox and Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. I mean, it makes a difference in how the game's played. And another thing that's bad about the DH, and Billy Martin and Weaver were really bad managers using this. They don't take the starting pitcher out. He pitches more innings because when you get to the 5th and 6th inning, when the pitcher would normally come to bat, now you have a DH. So the pitcher stays in the game longer. Mm-hmm. So Weaver actually had pitchers that would throw 200 pitches in a game. And you can't tell me that doesn't hurt you. In the long run, that's not good. So those kinds of things are bad. And Billy Martin was bad for using pitchers and leaving them in the game longer than he should have because he didn't want to go to the bullpen.
Yeah. Hey, I just have one last question on my end. I think this is kind of like I think there should be more public awareness about this. Foul balls and umpires, like, what's the deal with that? Like there's not foul balls are always bad to you. You got to call if it's a fair as a foul. It goes one way, it's the wrong way. You're always getting hit in the face with foul balls. They make the game longer and stuff. Like getting drilled in the face with a good foul ball. Would you get mad at the catcher for not getting in the way? Do you have a bad relationship? Do you wake up in the middle of the night, Joe, just like, foul balls coming to my face?
Well, your head's as hard as mine. You don't let that bother you. but the catcher getting crossed up, that's just, that happens, you know. It's when they do it intentionally that you should kick both the pitcher and the catcher out. But again, you can't be, as we said earlier, you can't be holding a grudge. You know, it's part of the game. You expect to work home plate and not get hit, then where are you going to hide? I mean, there's no place for you to hide back there. One of the things you'll notice is, and I don't know that your general public knows this, but the umpires will always work over the inside shoulder of the catcher. Meaning if it's a right-handed hitter, he's over the left shoulder. If he's a left-handed hitter, he's over the catcher's right shoulder. And that is because the ball coming off the outside cylinder of the bat on a swing will accelerate. The ball coming off the inside cylinder of the bat will slow down. And I can prove this to you by just watching somebody fouls a ball off in the upper deck. The pitcher couldn't have thrown it up there if he had to. And the hitter couldn't have hit it up there unless he hit it off the outside cylinder of the bat, which made the ball accelerate. It's like a golf club. The longer the golf club, the further the ball will go. So if you hit it off the end of the bat, it's going to accelerate. So the umpire works over the inside shoulder of the catcher for protection, not necessarily to see as everybody's judging pitches. And if you work over what they call the slot over the inside corner, and look out into the strike zone, then you've got probably a better view than everybody except maybe the catcher.
I was talking to Carl about this before the show and kind of giving him a breakdown of why that happens. And I'm sure that you've gotten a lot of shit for missing, or other people, umpires in the game have gotten kind of heat for missing stuff in the outside corner. Do you feel like it's a good enough trade-off for that, or is and a lot of people complain that umpires rarely get hit in the face anyways, catchers get hit more than umpires? Do you think it's a good idea to set up in the slot? Or
yeah, I
do
think
it's too many.
I think it is for safety reasons. That you got to realize the catcher's best defense and all the equipment that the catcher wears, the best defense the catcher has is his glove, because he's putting the glove where the ball is. If the ball comes off the bat so quickly that it would hit him in the face or wherever, it's got to hit a portion of the glove. Whereas the umpire doesn't have a glove. So, and I can tell you for a fact that the old American League, when they used to use that big balloon in front of them to call pitches, they had concussion after concussion after concussion, because they were standing over the middle of the plate and they were getting hit with that ball that would go in the upper deck. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So for safety reasons, that's why they're over the inside shoulder.
Makes perfect sense, Joe. And I got one thing I got to ask you. Why would you always make me throw a ball out of the game if it was hit to the infield?
Only
Didn't
if
hit
it
the dirt.
If it hit the dirt, it had to come out. If it didn't hit the
why?
dirt,
Sometimes you were messing with me. I feel like you're messing with me. I'm like, Joe, this ball, there's no scuff on it. If there's a scuff, I'll throw it out. I don't want the scuff.
yeah,
But Carl, it's for if it hits the dirt, it can scuff the ball.
yeah.
And they're told to have them thrown out. But it seemed like for whatever reason, Joe was always making me throw out more than anybody else.
Yeah. Well, they sell them at the concession stand. Anyway, we confiscated scuffed balls when Don Sutton was pitching. We're at Dodger Stadium, and we know that the catcher would scuff the ball for Don because he didn't do it. He'd just get the ball and pitch, But every one of them was scuffed in the same spot, right? So it didn't take a Rhodes Scholar to figure out that the catchers were doing it for him. So anyway, we were told, confiscate as many as you can and send them to the office. So John Kibler had a dozen scuffed balls that Don Sutton had thrown, and he put them in his locker, and we had a night game going to a day game. He's going to take the balls to New York the next week. So he's got to put them in his luggage and all this stuff. So he put these 12 scuffed balls in his locker. And we get to the ballpark the next day for a day game. We're packing up because we're going to leave after the game. And John picks up the balls and he looks at them. And he opens it up and they're all brand new. The Dodgers had replaced them all.
You ain't catching me.
No.
That's funny. How would he do it? You know?
Yeah, they scuff it off their shin guard.
Okay.
And of course, he had 2-3 different catchers. He had Yeager and he had Sosha. But the catchers were doing it for him. They'll deny it, but that's part of the game, you know.
Yeah, Joe, I honestly, thanks so much. Jake, you got to go on Joe's show. And Joe, we got to have you on again, hopefully maybe around playoff time as we kind of get ready. I'm interested more in like the umpire dynamic, the X's and O's. I really like what you're talking about, the shortstops in the hole making a play. Like the insight that you can bring from your perspective and these stories. I'm interested in following your podcast more and stuff. You got a great guest list, like it sounds like. And your perspective, yeah, like you said, people don't see a lot from the umpire side. I'm excited to hear what you have to say more, you know, as the show keeps going. So thanks again for spending time with us today.
Well, you're more than welcome, and I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. We'll do it again. And Jake, you need to come and do one with us because it'll be fun. You can tell your stories, and you can tell them how I threw the ball out.
Every damn time. Like, it's a good ball, Joe. I need this one. But no, thank you. I'll be on your show anytime. And like Carl was saying, I think it'd be fun if we do like a live stream of a game together to kind of get your perspective and my perspective as a player. You know, it'd be a good time.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. You guys take care.
Thanks, Joe.
That's Joe West, and just an unbelievably nice guy.
He's a sweet man, isn't he?
Yeah.
Not what people would expect.
Kind of kicking myself.
He loves the game too.
Things I said about him before, like sometimes you sit at home and you're like, that's selfish. It's like, no, that guy actually just is obsessed with baseball. We should ask him too if his record, which more important or not important, more impressive. I meant to say like Wood gets broken first, his umpiring total games or Cal Ripken Jr.'s game streak.
I don't think his gets broken. 5,460 games. I don't think either one of those gets broken ever. And you know, and as far as Joe goes, I mean, you have to love the game an incredible amount to umpire as long as he did. You know what I mean?
What's one thing that you
really
guys
love the game?
What's one thing that you guys think you could do that many times?
Oof.
I mean, obviously crank it.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
Yeah, I got
Besides that.
like that.
That was
I mean,
number
I think
one.
that's like such an easy guy joke thing, but like to do something 5,460 times, man. I mean, that's it's like 40 years of going to the factory every single day.
Yeah, 40 years.
Calling balls and strikes in front of 40. Now it's a cool job. Don't get me wrong. It's not like we're talking about this guy doing like, you know, he's not a chimney sweep. We'll say that. He is an umpire, but there's a huge amount of responsibility with that. And the fact of him talking about going to the ballpark every day with the mindset of like, hey, you could be part of history. Like that's what this game's about is fucking wild, man.
Yeah, it's a hell of a time commitment too.
What are you doing 5,460 times? Fucking push-ups, bro. Come on.
Yeah, well, yeah. But not I don't know, man. I mean, I would say golf, but I don't play that much. I like golf. I don't like it to play it every day for 40 years.
You brought up golf. I would like to play golf with Joe, man.
Yeah.
I meant to say Joe West.
You
I
did
have
play
played
with
golf
Joe.
At some point, I'm kind of like, do you think Joe West golfs? He's got to be a golfer, right? Umpires are travel. They got it for recreational shit they do when they go to these different cities.
Yeah, I would think so. I don't know many people that don't golf.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Now you mention
or at least have golfed. Maybe not die hard, playing 4 or 5 days a week, but yeah, I mean, most people like have played some golf.
And golf is popular in baseball, right? Baseball players,
Very.
but yeah.
Yeah, especially amongst the starting pitchers.
So I think with that in mind, I think it's only fitting. Let's fill out a starting 9, 1 through 9, right? If we could build out like, I don't know, a team of dudes that we'd want to golf with, one guy from each position, pitcher, catcher, etc. Starting 9, a starting 9 of baseball players. Hopefully these guys, I prefer they're still alive. The guys you want to golf with. All right. This is kind of the topic. Do you like this topic?
I like this topic a lot. Yeah, of course.
And again, if you find yourself announced on this list and you want to golf with starting 9, we'll obviously be more than happy.
We'll
to
set it up.
Yeah. So how do you want to do this? I'll give you mine 1 through 9, or do you want to give yours? I'll give mine.
Go ahead. Yeah.
All right. So, well, for pitcher, I'm taking John Smoltz because I mean, you got to get somebody from that Atlanta Braves rotation, and they said John Smoltz was the best out of them, even if fucking Greg Maddux is the guy. And I think that's just like
he's good. Yeah,
he's
very good.
Number 2 is a lame pick, but I have always loved the way this guy plays, Buster Posey. If I get a chance to get that guy out for 18, I got to pick his brain. I just like, I have to know what's going on under the hood. Like Buster Posey is not necessarily in my group because I think he's cool or sweet or anything. I just got to know what it was like catching those pitching stabs, winning the MVP, winning all those World Series championships, and just building a fucking dynasty. Playing first base, my number 3, Mark Grace. You got to have a guy carrying SIGs. You know, I just like the way it is. Like, you got to have a guy that's out there slugging the beers, carrying the SIGs, hitting on the cart girl. To me, that's Gracie. Second base is where things got like a little challenging for me because I didn't know if I wanted to go current. I didn't know. I ended up taking Jeff Kent just because I feel like Jeff Kent hits fucking bombs off the tee box. He's probably a huge asshole, talks a ton of shit to the guys. I think that's a simple one. 5, I'm taking Wade Boggs. I want Wade Boggs, my third baseman. The idea of Wade Boggs putting down more beer in 18 holes in the golf course can appropriately sell is like a funny visual. Shortstop, I'm going back in time. I'm taking Cal Ripken Jr. I know he's put on a couple weight, but like if you're going to fill out, if you're telling me we can golf, and like I'm going to get fantasy here, like of course I'm going to put Cal Ripken Jr. And then let's just take a couple outfielders here. This one was also tough because I'm never going to get it all right, but I got to take Glenn Allen Hill. Glenn Allen Hill has one of the most historic home runs in the history of baseball. If you could tell me I get to watch this guy drive the golf ball 14 times, where it's like there's just a stationary thing that Glenn Allen Hill could hit. Center field, I'm taking Kenny Lofton. Kenny Lofton's the only guy to play in like a Final Four and a World Series. So I think that's very interesting. And then rounding out my outfield, I want my fucking character. I want like as many characters as possible. I'm taking Deion Sanders because golf, it's about the stories. You know, he loves competing. I don't even give a fuck if Deion Sanders is good at golf or not. I'll chase and look for Deion Sanders golf balls all day long. I'm looking for some stories for my outfielders. I'm looking for my infielders to be kind of fucking drunk assholes. And then obviously I want Smoltz to just shoot 6 under. So there's my 1 through 9.
So mine, I'll roll through it quick because my internet is absolutely awful. Pudge behind the dish. Grew up a huge Rangers fan. Love Pudge. He's the only former player I have on this list. And in no particular order, I'm just going to roll through them. I got Jock Peterson. Love Jock. Good personality. Pearls, blonde hair. Talks a lot of shit. Plays in the big league card game on the flight. Love Jock. Tim Anderson. Love watching him as a player. He's got flash, explosive. I'm sure he's got some good stories. I'm going Rizzo. You know, the thing about Rizzo that's funny on the golf course, he's really good for 9 holes, and then he falls apart. He's terrible on the back 9. So you can take his money on the back. I got another buddy of mine, Hap. He's a scratch golfer. Looks great in golf pants. Nice ass. Really, really compresses the golf ball. Trevor Story, who I spent a little bit of time with in Arlington this past week. I hear he's a great golfer too. I think he's like a 1 handicap, so I got to play some golf with him. I've got Ohtani, just because his personality, very likable guy, and obviously one of the most talented players our game's ever had. So I'd like to have him in my group. We got Mookie Betts because he's a hell of a golfer too, amazing athlete, and very well-rounded. He's a bowler. He can dunk. He can play a hell of a right field. He steals bases. Need to play with him. Jazz Chisholm is another one. Just I love watching him play. I love the hair, like the chains. You can almost see his nipples in his uniform. He's got like 2-3 buttons undone. Big Chisholm fan. And then my guy on the mound, I'm going to go with DeGrom. We'll go with him, round him out, get him healthy. One of the best pitchers to ever do it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if he plays. He's got to play golf. So DeGrom, hit me up. Let's play some golf.
I love it. Well, hopefully, I hope that is an official invitation to everybody we just listed, by the way.
Yeah, all of them. We're going to have a tournament at some point.
Well, we have to do a tournament of sorts.
Yeah, a big event.
With a winner?
There's always a winner. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I just know that you don't like to do stuff. I would imagine you don't want to do something unless there's a winner and a loser.
Why would you do it if there wasn't?
Okay. Hey, this weekend, just a couple big series I want to point out. The White Sox go out to New York against the Yankees. Big eye on that. I think this is one of those series that can really continue to propel the Yankees forward. If the White Sox get swept, that could be a huge fucking problem. You've got a matchup with the Dodgers are coming out to Philly. Philly stepped all over them not too long ago. That should be pretty interesting. And then the Mariners are coming out to the Red Sox. Depending on how the Red Sox finish, to me, that's or how they finish this weekend, or I should say this weekend series, I should say, against the Mariners. I'm stumbling over my words. This could be very ugly for them. And then finally the Padres and the Giants are playing. And those NL West, Padres, Giants, Dodgers series, you absolutely cannot overstate how electric and competitive those games can get, especially if you're on the East Coast in the Midwest time zones where it's like, it's midnight and you see those teams doing battle deep in the 7th inning. Those are great fucking games. So I wanted to call out those series before we get into the weekend. Jake, what do you got for the weekend, bud?
Man, well, I agree with you. I like seeing games in series early in the year that are indicators of what playoff baseball is going to look like. So I'm with you on those West Coast series, with the Giants, Padres. Big fan of that. Similar to the series with the Mets and the Cardinals. Those are the kind of games that I like to watch. I try and watch as many as I can, but if there's games on like that, I'm going to tend to lean in that direction and not watch the Tigers, Royals very often.
No, that's going to happen. We're going to be back next week. With an interview. We're still getting things organized on that segment. Stay in touch. We're getting some good stuff on the name change. Nothing really has jumped out that I love so much so far. So
yeah, guys, and make sure you like and subscribe and unsubscribe, resubscribe, help us out, join in with us. And again, help us with this name change.
Mm-hmm. We'll be back on Tuesday with some Saber fucking metrics, some weekly awards. Those are stuff you guys can get involved with too. Tag us and stuff. If stuff happens over the weekend, you want to see us talking about it, obviously. Tag at Starting 9, like Jake said, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe. We're off and running, man. Next time we get together, it'll be episode number 5. This is our 2nd week in the books. I think things are going well. I've gotten some good feedback, but you really are. I've been impressed with your dedication to the product so far. I said that in the first episode. It's worth reiterating. I continuously am impressed with your prep. So thank you.
Well, hey, man, I appreciate it. And anything I do, I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. Once we get this studio issue ironed out, it's going to be even better. So thank you, thank Colin, and thank everybody for listening and spending some time with us.
Yeah. We'll see you guys next week.